Good evening, everybody. How are you doing? I feel like that parent is just was supposed to send somebody in the car and turn around. Hi, everybody. How you doing? I'm Liz. I wasn't as yelling at my children. Honestly, we're not yelling at everybody. I promise. We were just having fun, cutting up. And then Sierra turned it on. So, hi.
Y'all was almost busted.
Yeah, we was busted having fun. So, Miss Jackie, what's Friday night?
Woo! We're gonna eat.
Yes,
Friday.
We need more than that. We're wasting away nothing around here.
Yeah, well, we're gonna eat often, so we're gonna eat on Friday. You can tell. It's right here. All of us right here. Yes,
We
Taco
party down
Friday.
down here.
One thing this church knows to do is eat.
Hey, church that eats together stays together.
Yes, amen, yes.
That's called fellowship. We're just gonna have a little fellowship Friday night. Yes, the Friday tacos. Don't forget that stuff that you signed up for. And we're just gonna have a great time.
Yes, we are.
But guys, yeah.
Yes,
See that
the
before you-
guys.
Yes, the guys are gonna go out and hand out some invite me to church cards on Friday. And just kind of meet and greet some people maybe at the mall or the outlets. I don't even know where they're gonna go. They'll probably, well, no, they're gonna eat with us, aren't you?
They're gonna eat first with us.
There will be enough for us ladies to take home too, so that we can
Most
give out
likely,
at
yes.
least 30.
Yes, invite your friends, your family. Yes, it's gonna be a really great night. And I've got a little surprise, something to tell you about. I'll just keep you thinking.
You're pregnant?
I was pregnant, I'll be on the street with my stuff.
I would be crying and say, Jesus, what have you done?
I wonder what kind of announcement we got coming here.
I run away for myself.
Lord Jesus, I would be falling out.
Oh, man.
Not that we don't love children, we're just happy. Our children are about
Hey.
ready to get married. And the other one's happy and all grown up and just loving being single. So this is good. It's good.
I like this empty nester stuff.
Sierra, what'd you do last night?
It's not live, so I said yes to the dress.
She found a beautiful gown and we will not give it away.
No,
She just found a beautiful gown, that's all you know.
she just looks so purty.
There it is. It is party. See that like a princess, it was
Yes.
party. And Jackie and I made it, we didn't cry.
I
Well,
was trying to catch myself.
well,
I almost kind of fell there.
Almost, I mean, we got it.
I
Oh,
got
it's
it.
not
It
on?
is. I got it.
I got it.
I'm sending it to you.
Anyway.
You got it? Okay, anyways. So, we'll get past that. Now, however, let me see, who do we need to pray for? Mr. Scott is back in the hospital, so we shall pray for Mr. Scott. We are not giving up on Scott. God's got his healing, he's already claimed it, he's already said it's done. And he said, you're going to see it with your own eyes, and you're going to. We're not giving up. No hope, so we're going to see it. We speak it. No, we're speaking it, Miss Louise, remember? Our words. Remember our words. We believe it and we receive it already being done in Jesus' name until it manifests before us. Who else do we need to pray for? Mr. Paul has been watching. Hey, Mr. Paul, we miss you. Come roll your scooter up in here, Mr. Paul.
Hurry back, Paul. We still got your
Yes,
spot.
we got your spot waiting for
We
you.
miss you.
And I'm trying to think, who else am I?
Colleen.
Keep Miss Colleen, sorry, I don't know why I wasn't Miss Colleen in your prayers. She's doing better, but lift her up in prayer. Yeah, she's getting her chemo done. And Monica is doing well.
Monica's doing pretty good, yeah.
Yes, yes.
We do a CAT scan on the 25th,
Awesome.
and hopefully then it's all over.
In Jesus' name, she's already rung the bell. And believe that she's
That's the
healed.
radiation.
The radiation piece was done.
Radiation.
But they feel it's done good enough to let her do that. They wouldn't do that if they didn't think so. But We know because she was told that wasn't going to work, but God did. God did, so there's a point right there. So, and we pray for Miss Ann and her toes better. Hallelujah. Yes, Miss Marie will not be here Friday night to celebrate with us. She's heading out to go see her sister. Her sister's seen her eyes. No, not her eyes. Is it her eyes again? Is it her eyes, Marie?
They're having the redo.
Oh, redo the one eye. Okay, Miss Marie's sister in her eye. I love teasing her sister. She's got a very thick accent, so I'm not demeaning her at all. By no means. Love Miss Mary Lou. She's sweet. Anybody else I'm forgetting? I feel like I'm forgetting somebody. Oh, Kathy. Thank you, honey. Remember Kathy. Continually forgot Kathy.
Y'all, I want you to wage war for this woman, Kathy.
Amen. Yes.
She's fighting.
Yes.
She's fighting. And I know what I experienced when I was praying for her. I know what I saw. And the devil does not want to turn her loose, so we have to make the devil let her go.
Amen.
So
Yes.
there's no grave thoughts on this one. She's supposed to make it.
One more quick thing. I don't know if you guys ever go back and rewatch any of our videos, but if you notice, we're starting to get more comments on our videos, which is something we really need, which is really, really good for the interaction. But the comments that we are getting are a lot of prayer requests now. So in your spare time, if you are on Facebook, just glance through those comments, and when you think about them, pray for them. Comment and let them know that you're praying for them, and just
I'll go one
private
better.
message them. Do what you feel led to do with that person. Okay?
Make it your purpose, especially those of you that have a gift for intercession.
Yes.
Make it your purpose to latch a hold of those prayers. And some of you are even studying a little bit more in depth on intercession. Make it your purpose to dig in deep and really, really latch a hold of those people that need prayer. And I want to bombard heaven. I really do. And I'll tell you, what I want to do is bomb hell.
Amen.
Because it's the devil that does this stuff. It's not God. God allows it. God doesn't catch God by surprise. But the whole purpose of it is to rouse us to a place where we wage a war and we start coming out fighting. I'm tired of the devil putting us in the corner and making us stay there. We have nothing to be ashamed of.
That's right.
We are not to be afraid. We are to be risen. We are not to be laying down. We are the head and not the tail. Listen, I'm telling you, church. I'm telling you. We need to be bombarding the enemy's camp with God's goodness.
Yes.
Let's start tearing it up. When you see them prayer requests come along, dig into it.
Just remind you, say Gwen commented on Sunday, this past Sunday.
No, she commented today. She had commented on a previous video from even last month. So that's what I'm saying. They're constantly being commented on.
So Gwen, if you're watching tonight, we're going to lift you up in prayer. And I'm going to make sure I go back and remind you tonight to go back and comment on that. But it is important. And you know, if that was you out there in some other state or whatever, and you put that out, you really want to know that it's gone through the church is really definitely praying for you. Amen. It matters. It means something knowing that somebody's praying for you, interceding for you. When we learned today, Diane, and who are we? That's right. And what do we have, Miss Cindy? That's right. That's right. Two important factors right there. Who we are and that we have the keys.
And the keys represent the authority.
Yes, that's right. That's right.
So God gave us.
Yes.
God gave us the authority. We walk where we want to walk, and we pray where we want to pray, and we can call down every attack of the enemy and bury it.
That's right.
But we have to vocalize it. We have to pray it.
That's right, yes. Speak it out.
Without a key, you cannot have access.
That's right.
Very good.
Can't go in a door without a key.
Amen. Well, Jackie, I'm going to let you pray tonight. How's that?
Right. Everybody, let's stand in the presence of God. Just give our heart to Him tonight, our thoughts. Father, we just give you praise. Father, we just lift our hearts and our spirits to you tonight, Father, for the lost and the undone. Father, we call them into your house wherever they are, whether it be here or another state. God, we call the lost unto you. Take the scales from their eyes and remove the scales from their hearts. Open them up, God, and send somebody in their path to pour into their lives, somebody that they'll receive, Father. And Father, for those that are hurting and need a healing, Father, whether it be in their mind, their soul, their body, Father, we ask that you rebuke the devourer, God, that comes to steal and kill and destroy, God, that wants to put that light out that's within us, that wants to take our very life. God, pour a fresh oil into that lamp, God, that light will come back on and the light will come back into the body, Father, and that we will rise up and stand and take authority through your word, Jesus, that brings life into our body, fat to our marrow, God. We just thank you, God, for all the goodness, Father, that your word says we can have. And that we are all worthy because you died on the cross to give us that worthiness, Father. Breathe new life into our bodies, into our minds, Jesus. We praise you, Father, for life. We praise you, Father, for fresh oil, God, poured into our vats, Father, that our lights they'll shine bright. We just give you praise tonight, Father. We give you everything about us, Jesus. As we lift our hearts
Sweetest of love, when my heart becomes free.
You are the power girl. I don't want to embarrass you, but come here for a minute if you don't mind. The Lord has just shown me that, wow, He just wants to pour over you, just water over you, just fill you, overflow. Just like you just come looking for, like you got a cup in your hands, and you just want it to be filled. That's what He's showing me. You come looking for something you don't know. He's really because He's showing me that you're thirsty, and He's wanting to fill His water, not knowing that I have. Just you know. Lord, hallelujah. There she is. I'm so good at worship. Over and over again. I'm like, I just want to go yes, it's just like you're just like feel yeah, and you just and that's what you I know that's what you just came I'm here. I just want to be that I just want to take this picture and dump it over your head of water. I don't know that. If God says no, I don't. Okay. What you think, sweetie? Stand up.
such a glorious, peaceful presence up here tonight. It was, I don't know if it was out there. I just know it was up here.
Hallelujah.
Thank you, Jesus. Thank you, Jesus.
You know, it's interesting when you see the face of somebody.
Yes.
I just told Samantha, I feel like you belong here. Like, we've been
Yes.
waiting for you to show up. I meant to say that to you earlier. I'm serious, and I don't just say that to anybody, I mean that.
That's true, she don't. That's right, I feel that too.
Not to put you on the spot or anything.
I know, poor thing, and we do call people out, you know, we just follow God, you know, so that was nothing.
Yeah.
She says she's okay, she's all right, she's all right.
I'm sure.
We didn't scare her.
Yeah, I know. I'm here because I'm writing a book that God told me to write out of Genesis, and I was researching with the olive branch, and you came up, and then God told me to come here, so I'm here.
That's amazing.
You're doing
We've
a
been
book
praying
on
for you.
what?
I'm writing a book that's really digging deep into everything that God did in Genesis. The first couple chapters just feel like the world is needs to be restored in a way that they're not understanding their identity. They're not understanding everything that God establishes in the beginning is everything that Satan's attacking right now.
Yes.
And I think we need to fix that.
That's a very
Wow.
true statement.
How far in the book are you?
I'm going like literally verse by verse in Genesis, so I'm only into chapter 8, and I started at the beginning of the year. So
So it's a little bit towards the
it's there's a lot. Yeah.
Can I just share something? At the beginning of this year, you don't know this, but at the beginning of this year, God had me take the church back to the beginning of Genesis
Yeah.
to teach about the relationship between us and Him.
Yeah.
I have recordings of the services. You're more than welcome to dig in, but I'm telling you, there is so much meat. Just literally just in the first 3 chapters of Genesis, you can write a book on relationships just there.
I didn't start this to write a book. I started this as my Bible time. At the beginning of, God said, okay, start at Genesis 1:1 and go day by day, verse by verse. Oh. But the amount of pouring out every single day that I was getting, I was like, well, I don't think I'm supposed to write a book. And I kept getting to the end of a chapter and thinking, okay, I'll go somewhere else after this. And it was like, I couldn't. Like, I had to go into the next chapter and do the same thing again because,
You're studying like I study.
yeah.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
We'll tell you how to find that all later.
Yeah.
I'm going to tools that I have that you might not have. So
I
stick
love
around
that.
afterwards, you and Lizzie and I, when I'll get together, I'll show you. Okay?
It's interesting how sometimes when you're in your study time, that God will start pouring something in, and the next thing you know, you're writing all this stuff down. And the next thing you do have this book essentially sitting there.
Yes.
And I remember, I don't know when I even started, I think it's been sitting there ever since, but one day God did this. There was a sermon that was talking about coming to the heart of matter of Christ. And I really dabbled with it a little bit, and I've recently gone back to look at it and see what exactly I was writing it. I'm sitting there going, I wrote that? Because God just pours in something in your spirit, and you just put it on paper to try to explain what you're feeling, what your understanding is, and to try to show to people, really, God is about trying to build a relationship between Him and you. And it's interesting that tonight, it's not talking about the olive branch. I mean, you should have been here last Wednesday for that one. They talk about the grafted into the wild olive, or from the wild olive grafted into the olive tree. And but tonight, I was going on what I had felt from Sunday. I was thinking that there was a word, but it was like God had shut me up and said, no, ponder on this a little bit further, and so I did. So in further study and further things with it, we came to the conclusion of a few things anyways. And as many of you seen on Facebook probably, talking about doors and gates. And what had prompted me to go to that was that I felt like I was saying that He has set before us not just an effectual door, but a gate. And what I sensed was many gates. And so it made me go into further study and say, okay, what are the differences, God, between when you say there's been an effectual door that's been opened to us according to 1 Corinthians 16:9, and then you saying there's gates that are before us. Now we know that doors are things where we enter into rooms, buildings, things like that, right? So when God says, I've opened before you an open door, perhaps it's a door that enters into another room, another place, dwelling, whatever it is. But when He says that I place before you gates, what do gates lead to? Now, I'm not talking about going into your backyard. And I'm not talking about gates of prison. But I'm talking about, like, kingdoms. Territories. See, back in the time you have Solomon's temple, that I believe had 4 gates that lead into the court. Am I correct on that one, 4 gates?
I think study Solomon.
And basically, to enter into the courtyard of the temple, you would enter in through these gates. There was either 3 or 4. So here you've got gates to enter into a place that is an establishment of what I would say a type of kingdom. Because you've got the gates of heaven, gates of hell. And what I was sensing that God was putting into my spirit with this was talking about how He has put before us territories, gates that are open to territories. Why is this significant? Because when it's one thing when we're entering into another place of a dimension of understanding, entering into a room, if you will, and then it's easy to be able to just go along the walls of that room and be able to sense what's going on in that room. And eventually we get used to that new room. But we get into territories, something changes. If He's placed before you territories, and He says they're yours, then you have a place where, like, I want to get into a little bit of talk about where, like, the shepherds, and how they would have the fenced-in areas kind of for the sheep to be able to go to and then graze, and have certain areas, and the shepherd would guard the gate sometimes of the entranceway. And even God talks about that, or He kind of says it's a door, but, when the shepherd and how he, I'm trying to put it right, And I can see in my mind, I'm trying to describe what I see in my mind. When God says that you can either enter in by Him, and those that do not enter in by Him are like the fox that jumps the fence and try to get the sheep, and to watch out for them. So I think of a doorway or the gate, if you will, and Jesus is the main shepherd there that is guarding the way for things that are not what He wants in there to be with Him. And I was doing this study and was saying, okay, and it's a little bit of a sidebar, but you know where God says, my sheep know my voice? It's an actual thing with sheep. Believe it or not, a sheep will get, or trying to make sure I get the terminology correct. Sheep actually get used to their owner by their voice or by a sound that they make, and they know that's home. And they will follow it wherever he goes, just by hearing the voice, because so anything else, any person, whatever, can come up and call those same sheep, and they're not going to go after it. They're very stubborn, hard-headed, if you will. Does that sound like the church or what? But they are very stubborn. And to prove the point, there was a story of this lady that had somebody had broken in and taken her sheep and driven them out. And she found out where they were taken to. And she had asked the guard there and said, hey, if I can come in there and prove to you that there's only my sheep to be able to come after me, can I take those to follow after me? And she kind of gave us a brief description of the fact of what she was going to do and that they would know her voice. And he looked at her like, yeah, you're nuts. And so I'm going through the story and I was like, okay. And he says, you know what? Humor me. And so she sits there and she looks to her son or something and she gets this flute out and she starts playing this tune. And as the tune continues, all of a sudden little sheep started coming out of little places that they were hiding at. And then she starts walking down the road, and about 25 sheep started following her. And it was all her 25 sheep.
Wow.
Only hers. The guy said they're dumbfounded, said their nose. So we should know God in the same way. We often question, saying, God, is that you? Why do we question? Because we fear. I know that gets into a whole new topic and another thing on it, but we need to know God's voice to where we don't have to sit there and say, is that him? I don't know. Because he wants us to follow after him because he will lead you to the greener pastures. He will lead you to the places where he knows is safe. And he will guard you and guide you, protect you, break your leg if need be, to carry you around with him so that you're closer. So there's all these different things. So anyways, get back to my point. I'm sorry I got a little sidetracked there. But when he starts talking about these gates, I wanted to get into saying about how God will sit there and open these gates before you and establish this new territory. And yes, we can, just like with the room, we have a smaller area. But imagine, if you will, that God's placed before you greater places. When you take out the walls, what is there? You have this vast open world before you, right? The only thing that is literally to determine where territory is fences. That's how you know where the thing ends. But I think of when he was saying about there is gates that lead to even kingdoms. I think of how David would go into these places and tear down these kingdoms and would go after the kings and would establish the throne of God. And just every time you turn around, David was conquering kings and conquering this and conquering that. And I see how that there is things in our lives where God says there's been these kingdoms that you've been trying to go to, that he's about to open the doors to. And if you will, it's one of those things that you have been trying to do this on your own and try to push on that gate for too long. And it wasn't time yet because that territory wasn't being given to you. There was something God needed to do yet. But now I believe God's saying, I have set before you open gates. So those things that you've been in turmoil with, maybe, or the things with families and with just whatever it is that you've been struggling with. It's almost like God's like, I opened that door to you. And it's more than just the door, but the gateway to territories. And then when I think even more so of territories, I think of even places across the sea. I think of missionaries. I think of all these different things. So, maybe we're praying for God to take us to a nation. Maybe, and that's another thing, is where I feel like that God is making ways for us to enter into nations where the doors have been shut before. And He's going to make the ways open where there was no way before. And what I think of how God's like, I want my word to go around the world. And it hasn't reached quite everybody yet. And you think of like some of the places in Africa and all these other countries where like it's so dense back there they can't even get to it. Or it's so small and remote that nobody even knows it exists. But what if there was the way that God would say, okay, well, I'm going to take the impossible things that I've been doing and make it possible. Because I want them to know. I want them to know. And I'm going to put people, and just like I'm saying, each one of us, everybody that's under the sound of my voice, or whatever, whether you're listening or whatever, God is saying that I've opened gates before you, and I will tear down the strongholds. And when I see God opening these gates, I see these realms and things that you've been fighting with. Like I said, with the families and everything, God's like, I will make the ways possible. I will open the doors that have been shut, and I am opening the gates that have been closed. So think of the new vast opportunity that God is, basically, it's almost like God has put this in front of you to say, here's your calling. Here's your purpose. Now go and take it. Go and take it. Where it's been impossible, so we look at when we enter in, even through the doorways, we don't know if the light's out and we go into a room, we don't know what that room looks like. And it's like, God has said, I've opened the effectual door, we've walked into that door, if you will, and we've walked into that place, and maybe we've gotten to know what it is, but now, okay, God said, okay, the light's on, we can see what's going on, but now I have greater and bigger things because you've been in that room long enough. Now it's time to get out of the way of the walls and start experiencing what it is to be in a territory. And when you think of territories, you can think of Daytona Beach. You can think of Ormond Beach. You can think of all of Volusia County. There may not be actual fences to divide us, but there are territories here around in Florida. Borders and all this stuff. So think bigger. God's wanting to expand your mind to think beyond just this church. Just what you see. Because there are promises of what He's given us as a church where I'm going to take you to the nations and I'm going to take you to places where you didn't even know, and we've gotten it. We've had people from Russia and people that talk to us from China that are in China and all this stuff that are ministering to them. And that's just the basic beginning of what God's saying, okay, what if I can take and expand you to places because you're willing and obedient? See, that's the thing, is that God is looking for people that are willing and obedient. And if you're going to be the stubborn sheep that sits there and says, I'm not listening and I'm going to second guess everything, God's going to sit there and say, okay, or you're just going to sit right there. You can either listen to me and hear my voice, or you can keep on sitting there and just, but don't think that He's leaving you. But He's waiting for you, and He's going to sit there and He's going to stay and be patient with you. But He's calling you out and saying, I've placed this open door before you. Basically, the pen has been opened. Go experience the vast areas. Go experience what it is to go beyond your comfort. That's a word for you. See, we can get comfortable and secure in a building. In the rooms that we've been in, if you will, in your life, we've become comfortable with what we see. I feel secure inside this building when it rains and when there's a storm. But put me in the middle of a pasture and let the storm come, all of a sudden we become fearful. But it's still the same God that protects us, whether it's a building or whether it's in that pasture. If He's put you there, He protects those He cares for. So the thing is, I think He's establishing a new trust with you, for you. And so with that territory, it expands your trust in God. It expands the relationship, if you will, because we have to know that God's going to take care of whether we understand it fully or not. When you talk about promises of God, we can't understand it in the spectrum of a room, but in a territory. Because a tree needs space. And the promise of God is like a seed, according to the Word, that wants to bloom and flourish. And it can't do it inside of a closed building. It can't do it inside of a closed heart that is lacking understanding. But it can if your heart's been open to understanding and saying, okay, I'm willing to see what you have for me. It's getting you out of the comfort of what you're used to and putting you into a place that is new and unknown. Like I was saying about a couple weeks ago where I said God is hard to get to a place where I'm totally reliant on just you being the supply. When all of a sudden, if I take that paycheck from you for next week, what are you going to do? All of a sudden, we get frantic and start trying to figure out how we're going to do it. Remember that sermon? So, this is another area of this, and saying, okay, I want you to trust me. I want you to see what I have for you. Because what you see is not what you're about to see. And what you have been known is not what you're going to be known for.
Thank you, Jesus.
See, if we can get out of this place, I know this isn't fiery and all running around, but I'm just saying. If we can get out of this place of our mental understanding of, it's almost like there's been blinders put on you. Because we have allowed ourselves to get into this place of, God, I don't understand this, and we got to this plateau, and everything's been going good, and now I've got used to it. And God says, no. You're asking me for things, and you're expecting things. So I got to do the things in your life to put you into that place of what you're even praying for. Does that make sense?
Amen.
See, we ask for things, and God says, well, in order for me to do those things, I got to get you out of the way to be able to do the thing that I'm wanting to do for you, what you're praying for. You're praying for change, and we're sitting there getting scared of the change. And it's like, no, you need to understand that if I'm changing it, then I'm providing it. And that's a new trust for God. It's a whole new trust, and God's bringing you into this place because He wants you to be able to start running instead of just walking. And I'm talking spiritually. Yes. Because when we've got used to this little hubdub of, and I want to say hubdub, but that's a word, but I'm just saying, this little inkling of what it is to experience God.
Yes.
Because when the real fullness, and I'm not saying God hasn't fully come and healed, but what He has, this is just a drop.
That's right.
Compared to what God's like, I have all this up here. Spiritually speaking, I have a level here that I want to get you to. And you're all the way down here sitting there going, man, I think this is great. And He says, no. Watch this. And I bring you to another place. Now, obviously, with those new places, we get new challenges and we get new things. We get new devils, if you will. We get new things and we got to fight. But the thing is, we have to know. We have to know. Everybody got on that one. We have to know that it's the same God that was at this level.
Yes.
It's the same God at this level.
That's right.
Because just like where David started out with just a lion and a bear, he sits there and he says, well, Goliath is no different.
That's right. That's right.
But he had to get to a place where he was willing to take on the challenge because he knew God brought him in for this, and he said, there ain't going to be no different with this. And he didn't have to even second guess it. He just knew that was what God wanted and what God was going to be able to deliver them through. And look what happened. He became king and everything, and the lineage of Christ came from it and all this stuff, even through all the different things. Now, what is God going to do with your life? Because that is the thing that I think that a lot of people forget, is that there is an ordained purpose for each one of your lives, no matter how old you are or how young you are. There is an ordained purpose for you breathing your next breath. And if we can just get to that place where we understand that it's not about the next day, but the next breath that we take, what are we doing with it? Because we're not guaranteed that next breath. We're not promised anything. We can't swear by it. We can't do anything about it. We can't worry ourselves into it. But God says, I want to take you to places that you've never known. I want to take you to play things and experience things that you've never known. But I've got to get you to a place that you've not experienced. To get you out of that place that you know. Because we have gotten too comfortable with the place that we're at. So yeah, it's a love thing. It is an absolute love thing. And that God is saying, I love you enough that yes, I love you where you are. But man, I have so much more for you. Oh yes. I have, somebody say it. I have so much more for you. And that's all it is. See, don't think of it as God is putting you in through some kind of punishment. But this is where God's saying, I want you to come and experience me in a closer way. I want you to come and experience me in ways that you didn't even know were possible. You know, the longer I go through in a relationship, the more things that I realize, man, I didn't know that I could even have that. It's the same thing with God. He's sitting there, it's like, well, God, whoa. I didn't even know you did that. It's like, I didn't change. You just came into realizing that because that problem arose, you saw my hand in that. Because this thing happened, you're able to see me in that place. See, if it wasn't for the problems in our life, where would we know it's God? Right? So don't be complaining about the situations that you're in, because God still just wants to reveal himself in a new way. He says, I will not leave you. So why do we think that God's left us when we sit there and go, God, where are you? And he said there, I'm still here. And that's what you have to realize. I'm still here. Not me, but God's saying, I'm still here. I'm still here. I never leave you. I'm not like any man or whatever human being in this planet where they will turn on a dime and in a second of what you've known. But I will not leave you. And that's what we have to realize and trust God. That even when Jesus came, you see when he died, and then he rose again, and he came, and the first thing he did is go after his disciples again, and sitting there going, what are you guys doing out here fishing? And he comes out there and he's like, hey, put the net on the other side. And he has them come in and says, you know what? He already had everything prepared, ready to go. And again, he's sitting there going, Peter, did you still not understand? What did you guys miss out of all the stuff that I taught you? Why did you give up when you thought I was gone? Because I never left. Now remember, God gave us the keys to death, hell, and the grave. Yes. So if we have the keys to these gates, number 7. But if we have been given the keys,
That's good.
Keep going. You're just starting to nibble on the edge. You're just starting to nibble on the edge.
if you've been given the keys, see, here's another thing of kingdoms.
Yes.
And I wanted to expand a little bit on this, because when I was sitting there and God was like, hey, death, hell, and the grave was the first 3 that came to my mind. So if you had been given a key over death, And you've been given a key over hell. And you've been given the key over the grave. Why are those three different? Why are they separate? Why is the grave different than death? And how is hell different than death? Or the grave? See, we think interdimensionally and all these different things, but God's sitting there going, you're funny, because hell is this. And the grave is this. And death is what this is. And you hold the key, and that's just, like I said, just the first three. Now, if you just want to have just a little bit of blowing your mind, if God has set the keys, just those three, what does that mean? What authority did that just give you?
All of it.
What kind of power is that?
All of it. All power.
All power. So, now, okay, God just took you out of the room. Right? Because your understanding was, oh, well, this is cute. Death, hell, and grave, yeah, praise God, I've got keys for it. But now he said, no. Death, hell, the grave. Listen to the other ones. I didn't even go, I wasn't even prepared to go for that. But these are gates, gateways of dimensions of things. Now, I feel like I'm in some kind of Star Trek thing or whatever. And I start talking about dimensions and people think 4, you know, and here we go, you know. But I'm talking about things that God says, you know, when we worship, it's more than just sound that's coming forth, but it's light.
Yes.
Sound, you know what, that there's actually the stars, they have actually proven this. That there is the one star was like a bluish color, and it actually has like a B flat that it gives off. They emit sound. Light emits sound. So when we worship, that's why where Satan sits there and he was worshipped with light and all this. So imagine the fact of now you understand that it's more than just what you see with your eyes. But it's colors that come forth out of your worship. That's just a dimension that we don't even see. Because our eyes, he didn't give you eyes to see that. But you will in heaven. You'll see all kinds of color. Things you never even knew possible. But if he's given you the keys, what does it mean to have a key? Because you know you have a key. Right? I'm not just talking about a key to a Honda. I'm talking about keys. Right?
Yes.
We have the access, we have the authority. It's ours. So if we preach on this. So what have we to fear when somebody is dead? How was it that Christ rose people from the dead? Because he had the authority. But the same authority now has been given to us. So how come when somebody dies, we sit there and say, well, it's over? I know I can get a lot of comments on Facebook with this. They sit there and, well, how come you're not going to no graveyard and bringing them up? You sit there because God didn't say for me to go to it.
This church has called one back to death.
We have. There have been many instances where I believe where they were literally on their deathbed.
No, there was one that was pronounced brain dead, that is
Brain
now
dead,
alive
that is now alive,
and is
yes.
out in the community too.
There was John, Ralph's brother, was declared literally brain dead, and it's
No longer brain dead.
no longer brain dead. But that's just the beginning of things of what God's saying. Literally, death. I want us to just think of the aspect of, if you will, if you think of what it is to be in the presence of death or dead. Now, death, according to the words, is eternal separation from God. Without the presence, without the anointing, without God, separation, total separation. That's what it is for death. Now what is hell? And what is the grave? That's things that I want us to dig into and say, okay, what does it mean to be in the grave? Why did God give us a key for that? Why did God give us a key over hell? What is the significance? What is He wanting us to do with this authority? If He's saying that we can speak in faith and speak forth things that are not in existence into existence. And I saw another thing where I believe it was Ezekiel had the vision of where the stairs of heaven went to heaven and they came forth and they came back. It started from heaven, or started from earth, and went to heaven and came back, and it was ascending and descending. So it was one of those things where I was going through and I was reading this and I was like, well, wait a minute. It was ascending and descending. So it says that, what does the word say? The things which are bound on earth are bound in heaven, and which things are loosed on are loosed in heaven. Where did it start? Why? Because here. The Christ left, but the anointing is here. Yeah, Christ. Yeah, I'm going to make sure I clarify that. Jesus left, but Christ stayed. The anointing stayed. We're the ones to go when we pick up that mantle that God has given us. And we go forth and we start taking that authority and start knowing what it is for when you are given and open these gates that have been placed before you. See what God is taking you to. Don't be afraid of it. Take it as a personal challenge, if you will. Say, okay, God, you put me into this openness. You've opened these gates. What is it? What do you want me to do? Because when you start getting into areas like that, it's not just what a pastor can do. It's a body. And it's you. You are like the pinky or the thumb or whatever. God says without any one person, He can't say I'm more important than another. I can't sit here and say I'm more important than anybody else on this earth. Why? Because we're all the same. We're all equally. I know it sounds cliche, but it is. It's true. God has a direct purpose for your life. And He's opened these gates before you. So go and walk through those gates. Remember, it's not just doors of heaven and things like that, but these are gates. Think of the territories, think of the kingdoms and the things that God has placed in your hands. What is it that God just gave you authority over? What is it that God just did tonight? Think and pray about it. Because I can't tell you. Because I don't know. It's for you to know. Amen? Amen. Father God, we thank you for your word. We thank you for so many things, Lord, of which you've done in our life. I pray, Father God, that you would just continue to be with us, walk with us, Lord, lead us and guide us. Help us to follow after your voice. And even into the areas that we don't even know. Help us, Lord, as we go through this week. Continue to build our trust with you, Father